Hey everyone, it's the Nitty Professor. Let's talk heritage boots and welts, their pros and cons, and their comfort level, etc. So we're going to start here with this pair of Wolverine 1000 Miles. These are classic cap toe, and these have a 360-degree Goodyear welt. So pros about the Goodyear welt: number one, it can be resoled. So the welt is connecting the midsole to the upper, and therefore you can detach the sole from the upper, and the welt will just stay there and make it so that all you have to do is, fix the sole. Uppers stay the way they are, and you can keep your boots going for a way longer time over, say, a cement sole where you wear out the sole and you're kind of cooked. So that's one of the beauties of the Goodyear welt. That's going to be the beauty of all the welts here that I have to tell you about, with the sole exception of maybe one. So as far as Goodyear welt goes, might take a little longer to break in than, say, a cement soled shoe. It's going to add a little stiffness because you have an extra layer of leather there going all the way around the boot, but it's also fairly weatherproof. It's not like, totally impervious to the elements, but when you have a 360-degree welt, it really is going to do a fantastic job of keeping your boots safe, fairly waterproof, and also they're going to hold up for a long time, which is what we want. These boots are already probably a year and a half old. I'm thinking they still smell good. So I do like the 1000 Mile boots a lot. Very traditional construction. Some people are not like huge fans of the midsoles, but they work for me. Another pair of Goodyear welt shoes that I have are these Truman boots. I've seen them described as a flat welt, but I don't know. When I look at these, they are very similar to the, get this tissue paper out of the way, to the welts on the 1000 Miles. Difference is that this is a 270-degree welt, so these do not go all the way around. And one advantage to having a Goodyear welt that's only 270 degrees is that you can, for example, replace the heel more easily. You don't have to take the whole boot apart just to get at the heel. And maybe it might be just a little bit easier to break in because we're dealing with just a little bit less material there. So you can kind of see the heel is attached more directly to the heel cup, whereas the rest of the boot has that welt. So these are a pair of Trumans. They have a cap toe, and these are in the Evergreen Chiha leather, which I really like. Have had zero problems with these. They hold up incredibly well, but they're probably not my first choice to wear in, say, just flat out rain or slush or that kind of thing. So another example of Goodyear welt is going to be your Iron Rangers. So here's a pair of those from Red Wing. Again, similar to the Trumans, this is your 270-degree Goodyear welt. So again, you can see we've got the welt stitched down, and on the inside, the upper is stitched also to the welt. But here again on the heel, we don't have that welt going around. So maybe easier to break in, slightly less expensive, easier to just maybe, if you want to replace the heel. It's hard for me to imagine that happening in a pair of boots like this, but pros and cons. It's I think it's kind of a minor difference, but also there's an aesthetic difference. Some people want the boot to look just a little bit sleeker, and you kind of get that with this whole 270-degree welt. So that covers the Goodyear welt. So let's look at a different welt. So on my Red Wing 1907s, here we have a storm welt. And this is known as a split reverse storm welt. Don't ask me exactly what that means, but you can see this welt, it has 2 rows of stitching and a lip that rides up onto the leather going around the entire boot for the foot and the heel. So this obviously is going to add difficulty to breaking in your boot because there's just more substance, more leather there to break in. On the other hand, it's impervious to wet. I could wear these in all kinds of muddy conditions. I could probably slosh around in puzzles with these Slush, no problem. Wear these in the rain. Your feet are absolutely going to stay dry because the water is just not going to get inside the boot at all. Especially if you keep them conditioned, then the leather is also going to be protected from rain. And it's just, that's why it's called a storm welt, right? There's also a Norwegian storm welt. It's very similar. I'm gathering that this is not exactly the same. So again, the technical term that I found is split verse storm welt. It's also 360, so it goes around the entire boot, ensuring that the entire boot is safe as far as intrusion of rain and all that good stuff. So now, let's look at another Red Wing. This is the Weekender Chukka, also included in their heritage line, and this is simply a stitch down construction. So in this case, the upper is sort of flared out and flanged out and then attached directly to the midsole. So the upper leather is contiguous with the stitched down portion, and it's just stitched right onto the midsole, which is then cemented down to, I assume, cemented down to this rubber sole. So this is a stitch down construction. Stitching goes all the way around and very easy to break in, also very lightweight. So Goodyear welt is, there's more material, it's going to weigh more, it's going to be a little stiffer, a little more resistant to your flexing efforts, and therefore it's going to be a bit more work to break in. A shoe like this, break in is just not a problem at all. It's not going to take any effort. But would I wear these in slush and rain? Maybe not, because I think, you know, the water could penetrate through the stitching right on that leather there, and it would just, the next thing that's going to hit is my feet. So great for the sun, great for sand, but not necessarily great for rain. So I've got a couple of pairs of Rancourts to show you with different welts. And the first is their Byron boot. And the Byron boot is kind of interesting because it has Blake stitching with a storm welt sort of attached onto it. So the advantage of the Blake stitching, which you couldn't really see unless you dissected this whole boot. You know, to me from the outside, it just looks like a storm welt. But from what I understand, the upper is stitched to the sole using a Blake stitch construction, which I've read about. It's kind of hard to explain without doing a whole YouTube video with all the visuals. But in any case, the advantages of that is that there's less material because the stitching is more immediate. There's no welt intervening there. And it also allows for a slimmer profile. So you can tell, like, profile-wise, obviously, the profile of the Byron compared to, you know, this 1907 Red Wing. It's vastly different. And the welt has a lot to do with that. So with this Byron boot, Rancourt was going for something that's a bit dressier, a bit more professional, not necessarily something that you would automatically wear, you know, walking your dog in the woods or something like that. But on the other hand, since they added this superficial storm welt to it, it is a big help as far as protecting you from the intrusion of wet and all that kind of stuff. So I've worn these boots in bad weather and I haven't had a problem. I actually think it's kind of a nice compromise. So if you're looking for a boot, for example, that just is a bit dressier and, you know, doesn't necessarily have that Iron Ranger, I just came out of the coal mine look, then this is kind of a good compromise I think that Rancourt is offering. And, you know, it's all hand done just the same as any other good heritage boot, and probably better in some ways. So it's a good alternative. And then the last one I'm going to tell you about is the moccasin construction. It's another Rancourt boot. So these are the Harrison boot Redux. And here, since we're dealing with a moccasin construction, the leather wraps from underneath and up over the top of the boot. So the leather is stitched down directly to the sole. And that offers its own kind of weatherproofing protection, because since the leather wraps around, then, you know, where's the water going to go, right? It's not like it's kind of like stitched down there like a Blake stitch and then it could just get in there. So it's a really good alternative as well. And with this moccasin construction, we have, you know, this extra layer of leather over top of the upper And that in itself offers a lot of protection. I've worn these boots in all kinds of terrible weather, slush, snow, rain, and I've had zero problem. They're very weatherproof, especially given that this is a rough out leather, and it's, you know, by nature, just the way that it's conditioned, it really is impervious to the elements. So there are other kinds of construction in heritage boots, but this really covers the bulk of what you're going to see. As far as welts, you know, the advantages of any good welted boot, and I would include all these boots here, with probably the exception of the Chukkas, I think. If I'm wrong, let me know. But the uppers can remain intact, and the soles can be replaced. So if you wear the crap out of the sole, you can just take it to a cobbler, and they can replace the sole for you and give you your old friendly boots back. And it's obviously, as far, you know, for sustainability purposes and all that kind of stuff, these boots can last a lifetime, because in most cases, you know, you can even replace the welt, right? If you mess up the welt, like if the welt gets worn out, top of everything else, even that can be replaced. Then you could still keep the upper. I've seen boots with trashed uppers from like the 40s or 50s, where the uppers were restored, reconditioned, re-waxed, re-oiled, etc., etc. Soles were replaced, and they're up and running again. So from a sustainability angle, it is a really cool thing that we have access to this kind of footwear. It's rather traditional construction, you know, versus your sneakers and all that kind of stuff, where when you wreck the sole, you're pretty much, you know, you got to throw that whole shoe in the trash. My son goes through sneakers. He'll be lucky if they last him a year. Well, you know, I have boots sitting around here. They've lasted me for 5, and they're going to last me for at least 5 times that again, because of how they're built. So anyhow, if you have information I don't have or didn't include here about welts, love for you to share it. Maybe you have a favorite welt, you know, or give us maybe some information on your experience with having your boots resoled and how the welt played into making it possible for that to happen. I'd also be curious about your experience with weather, water resistance, waterproof, with this or that kind of welt, 270 degree versus 360 degree, and all that kind of stuff. Really appreciate having you here to take a look at these welts with me. Hope y'all are having a great day. We'll talk soon. Bye.